Hi everybody, it's Mark here from Taking Territory and welcome back. I'd like to just give a word of thanks to everybody who watched and engaged with my last video. Thank you for the thought-provoking and challenging comments. Really good to have you engage with it, so thanks very much. Today, as promised, I want to look at the age of anxiety and the modern man and our take on it and how we deal with this. And I'm going to do a bit of a philosophical riff, and then I want to give a practical look at this. One of my favourite quotes of all times comes from Stonewall Jackson. He was that fearless Confederate general that I'm sure many of you will have heard of, and he says, "My religious belief teaches me to feel unsafe in battle as in bed. God has fixed the time for my death, and I do not concern myself with that, but always to be ready whenever it may overtake me. And that is the way that all men should live, then all men would be equally brave." This, I think you will have noticed, is a deeply Christian perspective, but it also offers a confident and I think a liberating way to view life. The end is set, but what truly matters is about how you live in the meantime, yeah? So, you're as safe as you are in battle as you are in bed. Let that sink in and live like you actually believe it. And this will absolutely change your world. It's definitely changed how I live and I think about the world, from my point of view. Many of us, and I would even include myself in this at times, we can be what I would call life-sustaining, but not exactly life-giving. Now, what do I mean by that? Because that's quite a challenging, thought-provoking comment. I would say we live cautiously with the brakes on, and we're afraid that if we fully commit, everything might fall apart. We mistake control for security, but in reality, fear keeps us trapped in half-hearted living, doesn't it? The life I'm struggling towards, it's not about being reckless, it's about living with confidence and hope. And sometimes that means changing how I see the world. Building, I would say, new frameworks. Several years ago, I had a bit of a revelation while I was skiing in France. You see, I hadn't skied in about a decade, and the first 2 days I was probably what could only be described as shockingly awful. I was stiff, I was awkward, and I was constantly messing up. At first, I blamed this on rustiness, but on the third morning, something clicked. I realised that I was spending all of my energy trying not to fall, rather than actually skiing itself. I was driving, as a bit like I said there, with the brakes on. So I made a decision. I was going to attack the slopes head on, and I would trust my skills, let the speed build naturally, and let control come intuitively rather than mentally forcing it. Within minutes, my skiing improved dramatically. Simply, I would say, by shifting the mindset and letting go and responding to the inputs rather than preempting them. And through this, I found flow. So instead of fearing the slope, I leaned into it, and somehow, I don't still quite know how it was to this day, the skis obeyed. Now, I can't replicate this mindset and what I'm saying to you every single day in day-to-day life, but it's definitely a metaphor and a moment that stands out to me as a vivid example of what happens whenever you stop fearing failure and stop trying to second guess when or how it's going to happen. So my message, I would say today, is about working out what your specific fears are and then dealing with them. And I know this probably sounds like tired advice, face your fears. This message is as old as dirt. But I think we gloss over it because we have not carefully taken time to identify our fears specifically and to label them. Once you have given them a name, you can slay them. Now, in my last video, I said that men should be warring against the darkness in their own hearts. We need to fight where the battle rages hottest for us. And if we're honest, most of us are running from something. But half the time, we don't know exactly what it is that we're trying to escape. Here are 5 common fears that men I've talked to struggle with. Fear of rejection, fear of failure, fear of insignificance, fear of betrayal, and fear of being seen as weak. Your fears will be very different to mine. I can handle very dangerous and physically demanding things, and in fact, I even enjoy the thrill of surviving those things. So people might look at me and say that I am physically brave. But interestingly, my deepest fears lie elsewhere that people don't see, and I've hidden it for years. And I'll be honest, I'm going to be open with you. I'm afraid my biggest fear is that I will be a disappointment. And it took me a long time to isolate this fear and to give it a name. And in some ways, this is a blend of all those other fears that I mentioned earlier, that I won't measure up. And that existential dread has caused me to play life too safely. When something goes wrong, I do have a tendency to catastrophize. I'll spiral into the anxiety cycle, as many of you be familiar with, and I know I'm not alone. And many of us will carry the weight of the world on our shoulders, thinking that if we stumble just once, everything is going to collapse and we'll never be able to put it right ever again. And when setbacks do happen, we react as if the world has already collapsed, often making things worse than what they already are. But I've learned that we can handle more than we think. Whatever your greatest fear is, you've got to give it a name, and you've got to confront it, and then you've got to slay it. And to do this, you need a bit of courage and you need a bit of faith. And whenever you tackle the things this way, you'll realize that you already have the resources available to deal with whatever challenge comes your way. Fear causes us enormous pain, and this keeps us trapped in inaction, which further leads to greater suffering. Until your fears no longer control you, you're only going to be living half a life. And life shouldn't be just about surviving, it should be about living victoriously. And that means confronting whatever it is holding you back, your specific dragon. Here's a simple example. Suppose, and it's a very, very basic one, and I know there's kind of ifs, ands, and buts to it, but let's just keep it simple for the moment. Suppose you want to start a family, but you're struggling with confidence to approach girls. There are two battles I think that you need to fight. One is in the mind, and the other is getting to take action, yeah? The right mindset to approach, of course, is one of faith. I have this, I can do this. You have to accept that the struggle is part of the process. The rejection that you're always maybe or initially going to get, that's not failure, it is skill building. You have to reframe it. And any humiliation you're going to experience is not the end, but it's a character building process, and it's something that you've got to work with. You have to be creative, you have to be playful in your method, rather than treating each approach as a matter of life or death, and once you've been rejected twice, that it's all over and you can't make any further progress. The next bit, in terms of once you've got the mindset right, is the action part. This is the second part, and this is where I want to get practical, and I want to tell you about a psychotherapist, a guy some of you may have heard of. He's relatively well known in the counselling and the psychotherapy world, a chap called Phil Stutz. He wrote a book called The Tools, and he developed a concept called the reversal of desire, and he makes a very compelling argument about confronting pain head on rather than avoiding it. Now, he argues that the pain shrinks whenever you run towards it. And here's a story from Stutz's book, taken directly from the book, and I'm quoting. In high school, I met a star football player. He wasn't the fastest or the trickiest, but he was the best because he wasn't afraid of being tackled. In fact, he welcomed it. While other players dodged, he picked a defender, ran right at him and said, "I get knocked down and it hurts for a minute, but when I get up, I feel like I can conquer the world." He knew that just by going for straight at the pain, it would lose its power over him. Stutz goes on to outline a simple mental and a verbal exercise, something which you can do to nudge you across the line into action and help you reframe how you view what scares you. Me, whenever I use it, I think of it as kind of a mental warm-up set before taking action, any sort of action that may cause me some level of pain in the physical world, or more it's like a mental pain in the physical world. So the mental exercise is about saying 3 simple sentences and linking it to a mental image before taking action or dealing with the fear. So the 3 phrases are: bring it on, I love the pain sets me free. So I want you initially to imagine a dark cloud with your deepest fears hidden inside it. And you say to yourself while imagining this cloud, bring it on. Picture the fear or the pain as this dark cloud, and I sometimes would see cartoonish images or maybe elements of whatever it is that I'm scared about kind of popping out of the cloud and going back into again. This cloud is something with a bit of trepidation. What I then want you to do on the second bit is I want to imagine yourself stepping into the cloud and saying, I love the pain. Step into that cloud, breathe in, and feel the strain and the mental challenges that come with it and the chaos. But feel a certain stillness inside yourself as you deal with this. And then, which in terms of, so whenever you're there, you said, the pain sets me free. So sorry, number 3 is, the pain sets me free. And you imagine yourself stepping out of the cloud, emerging on the other side, after saying the pain sets me free. And you imagine yourself in the circumstances feeling stronger, feeling better. And whenever I do it, I'll imagine almost like a superhuman strength, with muscles flexing and a sense of confidence as I've stepped out. So it's bring on the pain, step into the cloud, and you say, I love the pain. And then you imagine yourself stepping out of the cloud and you say, the pain sets me free. And you have that sense of strength and courage that forces. Now you can use this as a mental exercise, as a bit of a warm-up before, as it were, going into battle with whatever fear that you're dealing with. It could be a tough or necessary conversation with your boss, an approach to a pretty girl, or something maybe just before you walk into the doctor's surgery after maybe unfortunate blood results. Use it as a means to stir up the courage hidden below the silt that's in you. This is a battle men must fight. We must change our relationship with fear and mental pain. Our modern society, as we all know, tells us how to treat this mental pain through drink, through drugs, through entertainment, through distraction. And we'll see that especially even looking at our iPhones or whatever. But this mental pain is not to be feared. It is instead to be embraced, especially if you are a man. In fact, I might argue it is what actually makes you a man. Women, I would say, blossom naturally into adulthood. They just are. But good men are forged. We are created by confronting our deepest fears, taking the pain into ourselves, letting it pass through us and over us without flinching, by acknowledging the pain and staring it down, until we can come to a point, albeit where we have like an uneasy peace with it. And I think that's what we're trying to achieve. Don't spend your days worrying about how long you will live. Instead, I want you to ask, how will I live? What dragon is guarding the door of your prison? And what are you going to do about it? What do you call this dragon? Can you get specific and name exactly what it is in the way that I've named mine? The fear of disappointing people, or the fear of disappointment, or being a disappointment? Why do you fear pain? You were built for it. You were created to occupy and take dominion over more space than you currently do. Growth only happens when you place yourself deliberately on the edge of your greatest fears. Your strengths will help you fly, and everybody talks a lot about engaging with your strengths. And I think that's a good thing. But if you have a 200-pound lead weight of fear strapped to your feet, you're never going to leave the ground. You will never soar with the eagles until you deal with that and you tackle it. So to conclude, here are 2 questions for you. Bit of a practical homework takeaway exercise. What are you most afraid of? Give it a name. And then what small step can you take today to confront it and become stronger? Think of it, I would say, in terms of exposure therapy. What is the most that you can tackle today, and what is the most that you can bear today? And then what about tomorrow? Can you take it a little bit further? Fear shrinks whenever you face it. Strength comes from walking through it. And the final word I would say is, the pain you avoid is the growth you need most. Well, I hope that was useful. Do, of course, leave any comments below, and please subscribe if you like what I'm producing here. Catch you next time.